Okay, so this infographic shows the 10-step process that has evolved over time from our experience with hundreds of customers going through the upgrade or migration process. We think of this as a best practice methodology.
Right. So we have a number of business objects consultants on our team. Prior have done lots of migrations, database migrations, business objects upgrades, and these steps are kind of the best practices, things that we've seen that have worked the best to make sure that you have a successful migration. So we're going to share each of these. Most of them have a component with the 360 suite that can be used, and we'll get started with that.
We will start with a poll. What is the most challenging migration or upgrade issue you've experienced? And the options will be available in a second. There we go. So one is planning assessment, cleanup, regression and performance testing, something else, or none of the above because you're a 360 suite user. I'll give you a little time for everyone to respond.
And you can pick more than one if they're more than one are relevant to you. We'll give everyone about 10 more seconds, and we'll share the results with you as well. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now.
Wow, regression and performance testing. Okay, the clear win.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it's good to know that's one of the steps in our 10-step process. So we'll go over that. Cleanup, it looks like that's also a challenge, and that's sort of one of our kind of priorities with doing the 10-step migration. So we will talk about all of these.
Okay, step one is to prepare. And with our 360 Eyes metadata solution, you're able to do a BI on BI assessment. And that'll gather detailed information on the environment, including what's being used, and just as importantly, what's not being used. Pauline, can you walk us through?
Yeah, sure. So so the prepare step is really to kind of get a sense of your environment. Maybe you're new to the system, maybe you're a new administrator, or you really don't have an insight into the content. 360 Eyes allows you to combine all of the audit information, the CMS information, and your file store information into one data mart that then you can report off of. Part of 360 Eyes is over 70 pre-built Webby reports that you can leverage, and you can also modify if you need to. And I'll just give you we'll show some of those, what some of those look like. So this is typically the one we start with. This is one of the 360 Eyes reports. And a lot of times we'll start off this with customers that are about to do a migration, and they'll tell me, oh, we don't use inboxes. Yeah, we don't use that. It's not a big deal. And we run this, and they see they have 60,000 inbox documents. So, it's really hard you'd have to go through in the CMC, all your users' inboxes, somehow count them up to kind of get this insight. So this is where we start, kind of get an assessment, and I'll look at what that looks like. So this is 360 Eyes runs in the Launchpad. And let me show you what these look like. Okay, so that first report, gave me an assessment where my content was. Then I want to find out, how much of this is actually being used. So with Auditor, you can get information about usage, But with an auditor report, you're never going to see what's not being used. So all these reports that you see here, so it shows the document path, the document name, and under the last action date column, I see no action. So these have been, since auditing's been running in this environment, there's been no action, meaning they haven't been refreshed, they haven't been modified, they haven't been scheduled, they're not being touched. If your environment's been around for a while, you're going to see that with a lot of your content. And this is an opportunity to do some cleanup, to kind of get an assessment of what's being used, what's not being used. And a lot of customers will use this report to gauge that assessment. Some of the other things that we recommend looking at is the tracking duplicated reports. So over time, users will copy Webby documents from their from the public folders into their personal folders. They run them from their personal folders, and you have copies all over the place. And oftentimes, if you look at this right here, so this technical dashboards report, this report actually looks at, it's essentially I call it a fingerprint for the report. So these are exact copies. So nothing's different. Same query, same filters, everything's the same on the report. They just might have a different name. The CUIDs are different, but they're exactly the same. So rather than moving, those, in this case, I think there's over 20 that are all, these are all spread out all over our environment, determine which one, you want to keep, and then purge the rest so that you're not moving copies of documents all over the place. Another report that a lot of customers like are these track unpurged documents. So if your users are saving data within their reports, that's going to increase the size of your platform. If you're doing a migration to the cloud or to another server, it's going to take longer if you've got larger documents. So this report will actually show you where data has been saved in reports. So this is a good way, and we see here in I have over 1,000 documents, and only 175 of them are empty. So only 175 out of those actually don't have data in them. The rest of them are saved with data. So those are kind of the few of the assessments that we do in the first step to prepare for the upgrade. And this is an example of a real life customer that I helped, that we're moving to data centers, and we took a look at their sizing, and we'll show you what they did with their cleanup later on.
So step 2 is to evaluate. Evaluating the current license pool ensures the right users receive the right license types, concurrent versus named user. Bruno had mentioned that in the first presentation. Evaluating sizing provides a picture of the current needs and gives insight into future requirements, including possible changes in the architecture.
Right. So this evaluate stage is really a chance to see, where are you, but where are you headed? So maybe your sessions per month are increasing. In this graph on the left there, showing the sessions going down. So maybe we had 6 nodes, and now our usage is going down. Maybe we don't need that many nodes when we move to the new environment. Or maybe you're seeing a trend upward. Maybe you know that you're going to be increasing the number of users, but also the actual users that are logging in. So this is a good chance to figure out where you're headed, with the future of that. And another report that I like to look at, 360 Eyes, is really beneficial because you can take snapshots over time, and you can save those snapshots so you can see trends over time. So this is an example where this is from 2017 to 2019, looking at those snapshots, and I can see where my user logins are increasing, the number of users, as well as who's logging in and who's not logging in. So you'll see on this one, there were 96 users logging in, but there were 185 that never logged in. What's the trend? Am I adding more users but less are logging in, or am I actually getting more usage in the system? Looking at document count, is that increasing? Gradually maybe increasing. Do we need to size for that future growth if we're anticipating that? Same thing with instances. Maybe you find users are creating more instances. What's the what's the future need of the system?
Okay, step 3 is backup and cleanup. And backing up the current environment before upgrading or migrating safeguards the process, right, Pauline?
Yeah, definitely. I like to delete things, and people always get nervous, but I always make sure that they know, no, we also recommend a backup before you do any of the purging of content. And 360 Plus gives you the ability to do that full backup. There's a solution, so 360 Plus will back up all of your content. Every object gets its own fire file, and you can schedule it. Most of our customers will run it on a regular basis, nightly, and it's always incremental. So each time it runs, it's only going to pick up the content that's been added or modified since the last backup. So you're not always doing a full backup, but you always have a full backup of all the content in your environment. And what that gives you is the ability to restore or roll back to a previous version. Maybe something gets corrupted, you need to roll back. Maybe you are doing purges, and the users say, oh, I actually really wanted to keep that document, or that universe is still used. You can easily roll back if you need to. I'll show you what that looks like. So this is our web platform. I'm logging in with my BusinessObjects credentials. So these are my BusinessObjects accounts. We're not replicating, you don't have to set up new security for 360. It leverages the BusinessObjects security. Nope, okay, so here's the web platform, and this is where my backup tasks are. So here I have a full production backup that runs on a nightly basis. I'll show you what the task looks like. So I can schedule it to run every night at a certain time. Most of our customers will run it in the evening. And then you choose what you want to back up. So all of your access levels, your personal folders, your public folders, universes. So everything gets a backup. You can save the number of backups, include the content. That's important. Then if you want the user folders as well, inboxes, personal folders, that's typically where the problems are. I usually don't give users access to delete in public folders. So in the personal folders is where you often have the issues. And then instances as well, if you can back all of those out, back all those up. So this runs, and then you're able to restore anything that you need to if something is corrupted. A lot of times there is a recycle bin in BusinessObjects, and a lot of times, unfortunately, it's not that something was deleted that you need to restore it. It's because it was corrupted, or you need to go back to a previous version. So here are all of my backups for this particular folder back in 2018, 2020. So each time it only backs up when there's a change, and I can do a restore if I want to. It'll restore, maybe I just want to restore security. It'll restore just the security. I can do this with Webby documents, Crystal, universes, users, and their personal folders. Everything can be restored. So that gives you the confidence when you're ready to do that cleanup to actually know that you can restore if needed.
Okay, so now we'll focus more on the cleanup.
Right. So yeah, being able to figure out, once you did that assessment and you figured out where your content was, and what's being used, what's not being used, and now you're ready to do that cleanup. And there are a number of things that you can do to clean up. And 360 View will let you automate that. So finding never connected users, cleaning inboxes, deleting unused content, and archiving instances. And all of that can be done within the web platform here. So we have a number of administration tasks that you can do this for a one-time job, or you can run them regularly so that you're always keeping your environment clean. So I can schedule this to be a recurring job. So right now I'm just going to show you what some of these look like. So archive instances is a good option. I was just helping a customer recently move from 4.1 to 4.2, so they were moving to new servers, and they had over 600,000 instances. And I tried to encourage them to archive them before doing the move, because that was a lot of content to move. They couldn't get their users on board doing that, but this is an option. So you can actually move all of your instances to a certain network share location or whatever location you determine. I can say anything that's older than 120 days, whatever criteria you want, and you can remove those instances from business objects. So rather than just keeping them, you're actually going to remove them. You can set up dynamic names, so when these get transferred off of business objects, they will actually be in the same folder structure that they are in business objects, so they can easily be found. But you can also include all these dynamic options: the title, the date, the ID of the document, and the owner, so you can easily find them if you ever need to get them back. And we will all these different formats can be exported, so Webby, PDF, Excel, CSV, or text. And this really gives you the ability to get all that those instances out of the environment, but you still are able to maintain, if you have a requirement to keep those for a certain amount of time, that'll allow you to keep those without having to keep moving those instances. And definitely if you're going to the cloud or going to a new server, the instances are the one thing that take the longest to move, because they are the largest files in the business objects environment. And then from here is where you can actually purge the Webby documents. So I had shown you before where you can see how many documents you have in your environment that have data saved in them. Well, prior to doing that move, it's a good idea, you can purge them. You can leave the prompt values if you want, purge based on size if you want as well, but this will purge all of the data. So you still, doesn't hurt the Webby document, it's still there, you're just purging the data, so when you move the report, you're not moving all the data with them as well. And then we have another number of other ways that you can do cleanup. Source object removal is one that is often used with this report within EYES that shows the used and unused documents. So you can export this list. All you need is the document CUID, and then import that file, the Excel file that has that document CUID. And we have one that okay. And then I'm going to delete based on the CUID and apply that. And that will purge based on my list of IDs that I want to delete. That'll do an automatic purge of all the documents. And again, I have a backup, so if I need to restore, I can. But I'm able to clean that up. And then the users, purge users. So one of our federal customers called me recently and they said there's a problem. He ran this purge users. I think they had a requirement if the users didn't log in within 90 days, they were supposed to be disabled. So he actually had this job that ran. So every 90 days they would disable the users because they were supposed to change their passwords every 90 days. And then he was ready to delete the users. So he selected this, and I think it was anyone that hadn't logged in, and I don't remember what the time frame was, but say you want to purge anyone that hasn't logged in 120 days. So he called me and said there's an issue. It purged 1,500 users out of my system. He had about 2,000, so he's left with about 500 users. And we went and looked, and I said, well, yeah, we generated a list, and we saw that all those users hadn't logged in over 2 years, 3 years. Some had never logged in. So he was then comfortable with, what had been purged. But this is a good way to, do some cleanup, because going to CMC and automatically doing that would definitely take a lot of time. So those are some of the cleanup options that you can do with 360 View. And then here's an example of what that particular customer that I helped out that was moving data centers. They focused on their inboxes. They were able to reduce the number of inboxes based on criteria that they set. Their user folders, that's where they had a lot of content. With Webby, you've got a lot of ad hoc usage. Those user folders tend to increase in size pretty significantly. So they reduced that by about 50%. And then instances, they focused on instances and set a criteria. Any instance older than a certain date, we're going to purge. And they were actually able to reduce their space by 80%, the space of their business objects platform. And that was significant because they were moving data centers, so it was across the country, and they did have a pretty slow network. And so if they were going to move everything that was on the left, it was going to take a significant amount of time. So they were able to reduce the time of the promotion, and they had a successful migration.
Okay, step 4 is promote, which of course is moving the content.
Right. So yeah, once you've got your environment ready and you're ready to move all your content, you might be familiar with the CMC, the promotion management, the CMC, and that will work. That works well for moving a universe and some documents. But to move all of your content, it's just not scalable. If you have any size of an environment, it'll time out on you. You have to create really small tasks, really small jobs. With 360, it's not an issue. It will move. It promotes all the content differently in the background. It'll move all the content. It'll move it in the correct order. So you need to get your access levels and groups over first, so that if your folders get moved, they have the right security applied. If things get moved out of order, then the security doesn't get applied correctly. But 360 will move it in the correct order, so that everything comes across. You create a promotion task. Yeah, I would do CMS to CMS. I'm not connected to 2 CMSs right now, but I could connect to a second CMS. I could schedule it for a later time if I wanted to. Here I do the full promotion. I select what I want to promote. Typically, it's everything. Even if you're not sure if you have it, it's okay to select it. Include security if you want, connections, all the personal categories, personal folders, personal documents. If I select that, you can include the instances, so all the personal instances, all the public documents, public instances. So I know a lot of customers have had issues with those instances coming over if they try to use the promotion manager and the CMC. This is not an issue. That customer that I mentioned, they use this to move those 600,000 instances to their 4.2 environment. And all of that content gets moved over, and it will run, depending on how much you're moving, it might take a while, but at least you're confident that all of your content is getting over. And right now, 4.2 to 4.3, if you're thinking of going to 4.3, it's just a migration, it's just moving content. So that's all that's needed. If you're going to the cloud, again, moving content to the cloud, do a promotion. So there's a number of reasons why you'd want to do the promotion.
Okay, step 5, you might be wondering why we're saying backup and clean up again. In some cases, it may make sense to promote the content to the new environment first, and then back up and clean up. So in this particular scenario, step 5 then is backup and clean up.
Right. So we worked with a number of customers, and they either had a time frame where they had to get the content moved over, going to the cloud or their new servers, so they could get started on testing. So some weren't comfortable with doing the cleanup and the backup prior to the migration. They want to do it after, which is perfectly acceptable. So this would be the same steps. It's just if you didn't do it in the first phase of the backup in step 3, then you would do it here. Assess your environment, look at what can be cleaned up, users, unused documents, and similar steps of doing that cleanup as well.
Step 6 is to optimize. Upgrades and migrations are an excellent time to optimize the application.
Right. So yeah. So this is just making sure your environment's performing as best it can. This is especially important if you're going to the cloud. We've done webinars before where we only talk about migrations to the cloud, and there are a number of different things that you want to consider when going to the cloud. But this is useful whether you're just moving to a new server or upgrading business objects. So looking at all your universes, what's being used, what's not being used. So this unused universe objects, this report will give you a list of all your universes the number of objects in those universes, and the number used. So that means they're on a report in the environment. And definitely this is a good thing to assess after you do cleanup, because you'll find that maybe there's some universes that really aren't being used, and then the usage ratio, and then you can get the details. So again, these are all the universes, the classes, the objects. So this first one, database ID, this object's not used in any report in my environment. Database name is used in 6 different reports in my environment. So you can get an idea of what's being used, what's not being used. One of the other things I like to recommend, especially if going to the cloud, often what you're paying for is data out. So the more data you're sending out of the environment, the more you're going to pay. So this scheduling analysis report is really helpful to give you an idea of how to consolidate your schedules. If you find running this gives you a list of all your schedules, who they're going to. You can include the email, the user that's running it, the prompts and the prompt values that are being passed to these schedules. Maybe the same report's running 20 times throughout the day to a group of people. Does it make more sense to run it once? Maybe send it to SharePoint, send it to a network share, rather than running it 20 times a day, or just save it to BusinessObjects, and the users that want it can go get the information. Maybe it needs to be bursted, but they don't need all the information. So this is a good way of consolidating, especially if you're going to the cloud. It is really important to minimize the amount of content you're sending out of the environment. And then also looking at the reports and improving the performance of your Webby documents is helpful. This report will document your reports, tells you what objects are in the queries, the variables, the filters, and it'll tell you whether they're even used or not. So sometimes objects get pulled in the query and they're not used. Variables are significantly change the performance, will affect the performance of your report. So in this example here, you see all these variables, none of them are used, and whatever logic is in those variables will get processed. So after the SQL runs, that logic is going to get processed, and that's going to make the report run a lot slower. So cleaning up some of those, it will definitely improve performance of your platform.
Step 7 is assure quality. So the end users must be able to rely on the new outputs. So regression testing is an essential part of the upgrade process. Done manually, regression testing is time consuming, it's tedious and risky.
Right, and Don, this was from the poll that we had, this was the one thing that most people had the biggest challenge with. So we'll take a look at what you can do with 360 bind. So on the left, imagine you're going to 4.3. So what you're doing with 360 bind is scheduling your reports in the environment before the change, schedule the same set after the change, and 360 bind automates the comparison to identify if there are any data differences, structure, style, or even performance differences. So you see the title, all those orange cells are where the differences are, and then on the graph you see the red squares that shows the differences. So let's jump into 360 bind to show you what that looks like. So first, what I did in my example, I'm comparing Oracle and Snowflake. So I'm moving to Snowflake. So I scheduled my reports that are pointing to Oracle, universes pointing to Oracle right now, and then also scheduled the same set for Snowflake. And then I want to compare and see what the differences are. Okay, so I'm going to go to my comparison. And if any of you are 360 bind users, this is our newest web platform. This is the newest version. I definitely encourage you to get on this platform. It's been significantly improved. I mean, it was great before, and now it's even better. And in our next release next month, we'll have even better options as well. So definitely upgrade if you haven't upgraded to this yet. So here is my comparison task where I compared the Oracle and Snowflake documents, and I get my results here. These can be scheduled, emailed to you. So if you've got a set of 50 documents you're scheduling, you don't have to wait for them to run. You're getting to the email with the link and look at it when you're ready. So I'm going to look at my first document. There's 3 that aren't matching, and I'm going to expand that. So on the left, you see the title is in that orange. It's labeled title, and for some reason now it's labeled before update. Then you see all these orange cells to indicate there's something different. They look the same to me, but if I click on it, you see the width is different. So I had selected to compare structure and style as well. Maybe you don't care about that. Maybe you don't care that it's a little wider. So maybe you don't want to compare that. Maybe just care about the data. But that is an option. And then this last row here, there's an extra row in the report on the left that wasn't there. And then if I scroll, I had chosen to select or to compare images, which the graphs are treated as images. So you see all these red squares. That's where the graphs are different on that page. And I can go through each page. So if you look, I have 186 pages in my document. Well, I don't have to go through all 186. Anywhere I see the orange, the page numbers are highlighted in orange there in the bottom right. Those are where the differences are. So I can just jump to the pages that have differences. Okay, and I'll go to my next report. So this one, the orange tick mark shows I only had one difference. I think I also wanted to compare execution time. So on the left, it took 5 seconds, and on the right, it took 19 seconds. So I had set a threshold, and I think it was 20%. Anytime the response time was different by 20%, I wanted to be notified. This is really important if you're moving a new platform, maybe you didn't configure your Webby processes, maybe you need to add more resources to the server, you're going to the cloud, you need more resources, maybe Snowflake isn't configured or sized properly, so it's getting slower performance. So that definitely a good thing to highlight as well. So there may not be any data differences, it may just be the response time. And then the last one will show, so this column is all highlighted because it looks like, I had selected the text color to be, a difference if there was a difference in style. And so that's highlighted. I have 2 tabs in this report, so sales and sales by year. I can switch to the second tab and I'll see, so on the left, it looks like I had some kind of conditional formatting based on the number, and it looks like it's gone on the right. So I can, again, look at what's different, and I'll highlight those. And the nice thing is I can rerun this, update this task and rerun it. So maybe I don't really care. I don't care about the style. I don't care if the font's different or the width. I don't care about the structure. Maybe I only care about data, the images, and the execution time. I'll just run this again. But these are all the different things that you can compare. I'm gonna run this again. Let me just take a second. So it's in my pending tab right now. And now it's running. It's pretty quick. I only have 3 documents in there. So that'll finish. And then I can open this up. And now you won't see as much of that orange because I'm no longer, so before this was highlighted because it was different. You can still see that, so the width is 137 on the left and 143 on the right, but it's not highlighting it as a difference. So really it's just I'm focusing on the data now. That's really what I care about. These data elements are different. And I want to focus on those. So that is 360 binds. Definitely makes your regression testing run smoother, takes the manual work out of comparing the results of your reports.
Yeah, that's a huge time saver. So step 8 is to analyze impact. Impact analysis is particularly useful in the case of regressions, as we discussed, and calculation engine changes, because it identifies all the reports that may be impacted.
Right. So so in this example, I found So in this example, okay, so I found, go back to the other report that had the data differences. Oh, this is my other one. I guess I closed that. So I wanted to look at where those differences were here. Okay. So, maybe revenue, something is off with revenue, right? In this example, you see these two values are different. Maybe revenue has a calculation, maybe there's a variable that's doing a calculation, maybe it's changed, the calculation engine changed, and Webby's changed. Maybe it's something, an Oracle, Oracle function that worked one way, and now I'm moving a snowflake and it's working differently. So I can use the 360i's reports to find, where else is that particular object or variable used? Because oftentimes, when doing your regression testing, if you have 60,000 documents in your environment, you're not going to test all 60,000 documents. You're going to find a representative sample, which ones are most used, what, crosses most of your data sources, your universes, so that you have a representative sample. But then you also want to see, if you do find regressions, where else are those regressions in your reports? And there are a number of 360i's impact analysis reports that give you that information, because we extract, so eyes will extract all the metadata about your reports, all your objects, all of the SQL, everything is extracted from your report, so that you know exactly what's being used, which reports are affected by a change, by this regression. So I can search for all of my objects. Take a minute for them to come back. But I can put in, maybe I just want to know which reports point to a certain universe. Maybe I'm concerned about a particular object. Maybe it's a particular variable that I'm looking for. So here I go. So I can find the object, which universe it's used in. So I can, I'm gonna pick that one, and I select the snapshot. And again, this could be before and after your change. So you can use eyes before and after, so you can see maybe something might have changed with that. So this gives me a list of all of the documents, the path and the document name that contain that particular object, so I know what's going to be impacted by that regression. So when we do the fix and then the testing, we know how, where to focus the testing. And this can be done with any of the content. So I usually like to use the SQL impact analysis report. It'll identify, where certain tables, maybe you need to know where a certain table is used, or a column, or even a database function, or something used in your reports. Where is that in the SQL of the reports? And you can find that very easily. Run this report, and it'll tell you. So I have 3 crystal reports that contain that table, so I know those are going to be impacted by maybe a certain regression that I found, or something with that particular column. And you can do the same thing with variables, searching on the syntax of the variables, different logic, so you know what that impact is.
Okay, step 9 is go live. Upgrades raise the problem of how to migrate the delta or promote content that was created or modified during the upgrade process. So Pauline, can you speak to that?
Right. So, you did your promotion back in, I forget which step it was, but now you're ready to go live. Well, in the meantime, you did your promotion, you're testing in your new platform, but users are still, you didn't freeze production. That's usually not, that's usually frowned upon. So that usually keeps running. Users are still creating reports and creating instances. Users are being added. So that's, still active. So now you're ready to go live. Well, how do you get all that content over? So there is an option with 360 Plus to do a delta promotion, to actually promote just the content that's changed. So it'll look at the last update date and move that promotion. For customers that have a lot of content in their environment, they'll do this regularly. So they'll schedule, you can actually schedule the promotion. And so let's do this real quick. So I can say, okay, I want this to run every day. It's going to run in the evening. And what this will do is keep the environments in sync. So I select the Delta option. And I know the things that are changing, I know I'm not going to change access levels or groups, but personal folders, public folders, universes might change, and we'll just say users, the users might change as well. So I'm going to select that and then make sure, just keep them in sync. So on a daily basis, this will run and it will keep the environment in sync. So when I'm ready to go live, I don't have to then spend, the same days to get all my content moved over, redo it, because then you've kind of negated your tests, right? Now you've started over from scratch. Now you're just ready. You literally can flip the switch and say, okay, we're ready to go, because all your content will be there. So that Delta promotion is definitely helpful for that.
Okay, step 10 is to comply. And this entails a review that regulatory requirements are being met and to ensure security is set up and applied correctly.
Right. So once you've got all your content over, you want to make sure, checking security, has it been applied correctly? There are a number of security reports within 360 Eyes that will actually compare the security. And again, the snapshots make this possible. So maybe I have a snapshot from my environment where my, in 4.2, and then I have a snapshot for 4.3, and I can actually do a comparison. So across the top are all my groups, and then my folders are down the left, and I actually can see where the differences are. So in this case, I had view before, so maybe this is my 4.2 snapshot, as my 4.3 snapshot, the 4.2. So this group had view, now still has view, so no change. But then here, when I see the highlight in yellow, so this particular group, this 99 retail, had view, and now they have view on demand. Is that an issue? So you can kind of see what what has maybe changed. Do you need to reapply permissions? To being able to document that security, you can look at universe security. Being able to document that is really key. And then going forward, documenting everything that you've changed in your environment, continuing regression testing. So it's definitely a huge use case for regression testing when doing an upgrade, but ongoing, you also want to do regression testing. You make a change to the universe, or you apply an upgrade to your database. There's always a need to continue to do regression testing, implementing a disaster recovery plan. We'll talk about that in our contingency planning session later on today. If you're interested in that, please join. But that, what are your strategies behind if you do have a disaster, making sure you have versioning so that if you do need to roll back to a different version, it's got a number of developers working on universes and webbies. This is a good way to implement controls and have controls over the environment, and be able to have traceability so that you're auditing what's being changed, and then ongoing understanding what's being used, those trends that I showed you ongoing. Is it still growing? Do we need to add a new node? Maybe increase the licenses. What's the usage like in the environment ongoing?
Okay, poll question number 2. In what area do you expect to do a migration over the next 12 months? And the options are migration or upgrade to a more recent version of BusinessObjects, migration to the cloud or a cloud hybrid model, migration to a database such as HANA or Snowflake, and the fourth option is supposed to be no migration is expected.
We'll give everyone a few, 30 more seconds to respond to the poll. And please, if you have any questions, ask your questions as well. We'll get to questions in a minute. Okay, just a few more seconds and I'm going to close this. Okay. Looks like we're mostly migrating or upgrading to a new version of BusinessObjects. Okay. Maybe a fewer considering moving to HANA or Snowflake. Okay. It's interesting.
Okay, so hopefully this 10-step process makes sense to you. It really streamlines the migration process, saving a lot of time and ensuring the migration is done correctly. So the value of 360 Suite is really felt by many throughout the organization. You know, the admin can bulk update manual tasks and maintain a clean environment. The BI manager can reduce timelines and therefore reduce cost. The auditor can document historical changes and complete account and user recertification, which is important in federal per the FISMA regulation. And on the business side, you know, they'll benefit from faster implementations of the new version, and we'll get rid of regressions. So, you know, the overall value is really 360 Suite brings automation, and with that, it brings cost reduction.
Right, so just a few resources, and again, we're going to share these slides, but that optimize your business objects upgrade. So those 10 steps that we shared, we have an ebook that actually has more detail about each of those steps, and we invite you to take a look at that if you'd like to look into more detail. And then we have a number of customer migration and upgrade use cases that you can look at, how they handle their migration, and that might be of interest to you as well.
So 360 Suite addresses many use cases, and we've touched on just a few today. You know, let us know your particular use case or business objects challenge or issue, and we'll be happy to address it in a demo or even a free trial.
All right, so looking at, we have a question here, just based on promotion management, can we get just one product from 360? And yes, you can. So 360 is a suite of 8 solutions, and you can pick and choose which solutions you want. So you know, a lot of our customers will choose, maybe they have 3 initially, and most end up buying all of them as they move on. But yeah, definitely, if you only have a need for 1 or 2, you can certainly purchase just 1 or 2.
Another question is, my users won't let me archive unused content. Do you have a solution?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, we do have an archive solution that will actually hide the content. So what it does is it'll put an access level. It's in 360. It's part of 360 View. So it'll put an access level over the content. So we do have one federal customer that was interested in doing this before they do cleanup. So rather than doing the delete, which I love to do, purge everything, they wanted to be a little more conservative and hide the content first. So they know that, you know, the users, based on the usage, they see no one's run it in 2 years, but they want to make sure that's the case. So what they do is put the access level, and that will actually hide them. So they're still there in the platform, but the users can't see them. So if a user does ask for it, it's easy as flipping a switch to make it available again. But that maybe they're going to do that. I think the plan was to do it for several months. If they don't hear from the users about any of the content, then they'll be more confident with purging it. So, yeah.
Another question from Robert is, my auditor is really large. Can you keep the audit information? Yeah, definitely. With 360 Eyes, you can actually maintain that audit information because 360 Eyes doesn't extract the entire audit database. It's just a subset. And so when when you run the audit, it's appending that audit data. So we have a lot of customers that on a quarterly basis, they post their audit data, but they still want to have that information about what's being used and what's not being used. So if you purge that, every 4 months, we're not going to know what's being used, if it's something that's used on a yearly basis. So with 360 Eyes, you can maintain that audit data. And you'll see in our environment, I've had XIR2, 3.1, 4.0, 4.1, 4.2. So we have all those. We've kept the same database, and every time we upgrade, we just upgrade Eyes, and it continues to work in the version that we're in. So we're able to maintain that history
so that we don't lose the audit data. And that's really beneficial, because a lot of times, you might go to 4.1 to 4.2, you start over with your audit database, you've lost all that history until usually it's a year before you get back all that history about what's being used. So EYES allows you to keep that audit information.
And the last question from Chen is, how long will it take to promote all my content to the cloud? That could be a tough one to answer, but give it a shot, Pauline.
Where you go, Don? No, just kidding. Yeah, I mean, that really will depend. We definitely have some baselines that we can, provide some information and kind of give you a solution for doing that. We have 360 Plus is a backup solution, so you can also use it for DR. And sometimes if you're going to the cloud and you're not sure about the performance, using that backup and importing it so you move all your backup content might be faster than importing it once you're into your environment in the cloud, rather than promoting it. So there are a couple different ways you can do that. So we'd probably help you kind of take a look at your environment, how much content you have, and give you a recommendation for what would be the best approach for that.
Yeah, so thanks for your questions. And thank you for joining us.